The laughter hit Clara like cold water. She was standing near the marble pillar at the far edge of the ballroom, half hidden behind a curtain of white hydrangeas, holding a champagne flute she hadn't touched, when her sister's voice rang out across the room, bright and clear, and built to carry. "Oh, don't mind Clara," Vanessa said, lifting her wine glass, her wedding gown catching the chandelier light. "That's my sister. Look at her, poor thing." She smiled, and the smile was a blade. "This fat honey, you'll never have anyone your whole life, not a soul." And the table roared. 30 faces turned toward Clara, at once cousins, family, friends, strangers in silk, and every one of them was laughing, some behind their hands, politely, some openly, heads thrown back, because the bride had made it permission. Because when the beautiful one laughs at you, everyone laughs. Clara felt the heat climb her throat and flood her cheeks. Her ears rang. The flute trembled in her grip, and she set it on a passing tray before she could drop it, and she wished with a wish so total it hurt that she could simply cease to exist. But even in that first hot wave of shame, some small, clear part of her mind stayed standing, the way it always did. The part that had gotten her through 9 years of 6-day weeks and a lifetime of being second. You show up, you endure. You'll be fine, because being fine is the thing you're good for. She'd come to this wedding knowing exactly who her sister was. She'd done Vanessa's nails that very morning flawless, French-tipped, exactly to order, and she'd let herself hope, foolishly, that today she might just be family. Instead, she was the punchline. "She did my nails, though," Vanessa added, holding her manicured hand up to the light, and the laughter surged again. "Credit where it's due. It's the one thing she's good for." Clara looked down at her own hands. Steady hands, careful hands. The hands that had spent 9 years learning to make people feel beautiful, one client at a time, in a small salon on Wexler Street, where the light came in gold in the afternoons. She was going to leave, walk out the side door, drive home, cry in the car the way she never told anyone she did, and open the salon at 9 tomorrow and be fine. She turned to go, and the room went quiet. Not slowly, all at once the way a room goes quiet when something enters it that shouldn't be there. The laughter died in throats, glasses paused halfway to lips. The string quartet faltered on a note and recovered. Clara looked up. A man was crossing the ballroom. He came from the far end near the doors, where a cluster of men in dark suits had stood all evening, men no one had introduced, whose presence she'd registered only as a wrongness at the edge of the celebration, like a storm cloud on a clear day. He moved without hurry and without apology, and people stepped back from him without seeming to decide to, the way water parts around a stone. He was tall, and he wore black, and his face was the kind you did not forget. Sharp, still, carved somewhere between beautiful and terrible. His eyes were dark and without warmth, and they were fixed on one point in the room. They were fixed on her. Clara's heart stopped. She looked behind herself, because it wasn't possible, because men like that did not look at women like her, but there was only the pillar and the flowers and the wall. When she turned back, he was closer, 10 feet, 5, and the entire room had turned to watch him, and the watching was full of fear. Someone whispered the name, Moretti, and she heard the shape of the fear inside it. Raphael Moretti stopped in front of her. Up close, he was even more still, as though stillness was something he'd mastered the way other men mastered charm. He looked at her a long moment, and there was something in his eyes she couldn't read, something that was not cold at all, banked down low and controlled. Then he extended his hand. "Dance with me," he said. His voice was quiet. It was not a request and not a command. It was somewhere more dangerous than either an offering made by a man who did not offer things. The ballroom held its breath. Clara could feel every eye. She could feel Vanessa behind her, frozen in white. She could feel the impossible geometry of it, the most feared man in the city standing before the woman the room had just been laughing at, his hand open and waiting. Her voice came out small, but it came out, "I think you have the wrong person." "I don't." His eyes didn't leave hers. "Clara." He knew her name. The world tilted. She didn't understand, couldn't, not yet, but she saw his hand was still extended, and that whatever else was true of this man, his patience was not going to run out, and she saw the whole silent room, waiting to see what she would do. She had a choice, and she knew it. She could shrink, or she could take the hand. She lifted her chin, and she put her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and certain, and he drew her out from behind the pillar, out of the shadows, into the open center of the floor where the light fell hardest and everyone could see. He turned to face her, set one hand at the small of her back, and the touch went through her like a current. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, toward the quartet. They began to play, and Raphael Moretti began to dance with her. He danced the way he moved with total control, leading so surely she couldn't have stumbled if she'd tried, her body somehow knowing where to go because his told it. She, who had never once felt graceful, was gliding across a ballroom floor in the arms of a man the entire room feared, and the fear was giving way now to naked disbelief, to a silence so complete she could hear the whisper of her own dress. "They were laughing at me," she said. She didn't know why she said it. Maybe because his eyes were the only thing in the room, and it was easier to speak into them than to think. "I know." His jaw tightened. "Just slightly," I heard. "Then why do this? You'll be the man who danced with the joke of the party." Something moved across his face almost, but not quite. A smile. "You think I care what this room thinks of me?" "No," she admitted. "I don't suppose you do." "I have wanted to meet you for a long time," he said, his voice dropping, meant only for her, "and I decided I would not wait one more minute to do it in a room full of people who don't deserve to be here. You don't know me. You'd be surprised," Raphael said, "what I know about you." And across the ballroom, half forgotten, the bride in her white gown stood watching her invisible sister dance with the most powerful man any of them had ever seen. Clara caught only a glimpse of Vanessa's face over Raphael's shoulder, and it was the first true thing she'd seen on it in years. It was not only envy. Beneath the envy, for one unguarded second, was something that looked almost like fear. As though Vanessa had spent her whole life certain of one fixed fact about the world: I am the one who is wanted. She is the one who is not, and had just watched that fact break in half in front of everyone she knew, and did not know who she was without it. Then the crowd shifted, and Vanessa was gone. The dance ended, but he didn't let go of her hand. He led her toward the tall glass doors that opened onto a stone terrace over the city, and the crowd parted the way it had for him alone, except now they stared at her, too, and Clara had no idea what her face was supposed to do. Outside, the night air was cool and smelled of rain that hadn't fallen yet. The city spread out below, a glittering circuit board of light, the reception dropping to a muffled hum behind the glass. Two of his men stood at a distance near the doors, facing outward, watching, always watching, she would learn. "You're confused," Raphael said. He'd released her hand and stood a careful arm's length away, giving her space she hadn't asked for but was grateful for. "That's reasonable. You said you know things about me. How? I've never seen you before in my life. I'd remember. You wouldn't have seen me, but you've met someone who belongs to me." He looked out at the city. "There's a woman who comes to your salon every Thursday afternoon. She's 73, silver hair she keeps in a knot, hands that hurt her in the cold. She doesn't talk much, because most people don't listen." A pause. "Her name is Elena." Clara's breath caught. "Mrs. Moretti." "Yes." The pieces rearranged themselves into an impossible new shape 9 months of Thursday afternoons. The small, quiet woman, who always took the second chair by the window, who liked her tea with too much sugar, who Clara had learned, gently, over weeks, could barely feel her own fingertips because of the arthritis, so Clara had started warming a towel for her hands before every appointment, and rubbing the warmth back into them, and never once charging for the extra time. "Elena is your mother." "She's my mother," Raphael said. "She talks about you, constantly, for 9 months, about the young woman at the salon who remembers how she takes her tea, who warms her hands, who asks about her week and waits for the answer." His jaw worked. "Do you know how rare it is, in my life, for someone to be kind to something of mine without knowing what it costs them if they aren't, without wanting anything?" He turned to face her fully. "You didn't know who she was. You still don't want anything. You just did it, because it was decent." Clara's throat was tight. "She's easy to be kind to. She's lovely. She thinks you're lovely. She's said so 100 times. She told me," his voice roughened, barely weeks ago, "that she wished I'd meet you, that you were the finest person she'd met in years, and the world had somehow failed to notice." His eyes held hers. I told her I'd consider it. Then one of my men mentioned there was a wedding tonight. The Bennett girl. I asked whether Elena's Clara would be there. His voice went flat and cold, and something dangerous moved beneath it. And I came. And before I could reach you, I heard your own sister call you a thing no one should ever call another person, in front of everyone, and I watched them laugh. Clara looked at the ground, the old shame, automatic. Don't, Raphael said. She looked up. Don't do that. Don't look down. He took a step closer. I have spent my entire life in rooms full of people afraid of me because I'm powerful. Not one of them has the thing you have. Your sister is beautiful and she is nothing. You walked into a room where everyone hated you, and you did my mother's nails this morning for a wedding you knew would humiliate you because she's your family and you show up. That isn't weakness, Clara. His voice dropped. It's the only kind of strength that's ever meant anything to me. The first drops of rain began to fall, soft on the stone. And Clara Bennett, who had spent her whole life being told she was invisible, stood in the rain across from a dangerous man and felt, for the first time she could remember, entirely seen. He gave her his card before he left heavy black stock, a single phone number, nothing else, and told her, in that quiet voice, that if she ever needed anything, at any hour, she was to call it. Then he was gone, folded back into the night with his silent men and his black cars. She told herself she wouldn't call. A man like that was a door you didn't open, and she'd read the fear in that ballroom. She wasn't a fool. But he called her. It was 3 days later, mid-morning, the salon quiet. An unknown number. She almost didn't answer. You said your favorite client comes Thursdays, Raphael said, with no greeting, as though continuing a conversation they'd been having all along. My mother. She's asking whether you'll still see her, now that you know. Clara laughed before she could stop herself, surprised out of her nerves. Of course I'll still see her. Why on earth wouldn't I? A pause on the line, and when he spoke again, something in his voice had eased. Most people, when they learn our name, stop being able to see the person. She becomes a Moretti. A thing to be careful around. A beat. You just called her your favorite client. She is my favorite client. She tips terribly, and she's worth every minute. Clara heard herself, then flushed. I'm sorry. I shouldn't. No, Raphael said, and she could hear, impossibly, that he was almost smiling. Say things like that. No one says things like that to me. And that was how it started, not with a grand seduction, but with a phone that rang, sometimes at odd hours. He never small-talked. He'd ask a single real question and then listen with an attention that unnerved her, remembering every small thing and turning it over later like he was memorizing it. She learned he read history and didn't sleep much. He learned she'd wanted to be a marine biologist and was afraid of the ocean, and he didn't laugh at the contradiction. He said it was the most human thing he'd heard in a year. Then, on the following Thursday, he came to the salon himself. He came at the end of Elena's appointment, and Clara's whole, small, bright world seemed to shrink around him when he stepped through the door, her 2 chairs, her bottles of polish in their neat rows, her hand-lettered price list taped to the mirror. He looked absurd in it, a wolf in a dollhouse. And then his mother reached up from the chair and touched his face, and he bent and kissed the top of her silver head, and the wolf was, for a moment, just a son. Sit, Clara said, before she could think better of it. Your mother's hands are done. Yours look like you sign things all day and never once think about them. The 2 guards by the door went very still. Raphael looked at her for a long beat. Then he sat. She took his hands across the little table-scarred hands, a healed break across one knuckle. Hands she chose not to ask about, and she warmed a towel and worked the tension out of them, buffed the nails plain, said nothing about the faint, white line of an old burn along one thumb. He watched her the entire time, not the work, but her face, and Elena watched them both from the next chair with the bright, shameless satisfaction of a woman who has arranged exactly what she meant to arrange. You're not afraid of me, Raphael said quietly, when she'd finished. It wasn't quite a question. I probably should be. Clara set his hands down gently. But you sat in my chair and let me hold your hands for 20 minutes. It's hard to be afraid of a man once you've done his cuticles. Something cracked open in his face, a real, startled, human laugh, low and rough, like a sound he'd forgotten how to make. Elena beamed. He came back the next Thursday, and the one after. And somewhere in the warm gold light of those afternoons, in the small ordinary world Clara had built with her own 2 hands, the most feared man in the city began, without either of them saying so, to fall. It could not stay untouched. Of course it couldn't. Dante Ricci was a patient man, and patient men watch. He had been trying to move into this part of the city for 2 years, and he watched Moretti the way a chess player watches an opponent's one exposed piece. He had seen the wedding, he had seen the dance, and then he saw the black SUV that began to wait, discreetly, at the corner of Wexler Street on Thursday afternoons, and Dante Ricci understood, better than either of the lovers did yet, that the ruthless Raphael Moretti had just handed the world a soft place to press. The first men came to the salon near closing on a wet Tuesday, 2 of them in cheaper suits, standing too close, asking questions in voices that tried to sound friendly. How well do you know Raphael Moretti? Does he come here? When? And when Clara said she knew nothing, one of them smiled, a smile with no kindness in it, and looked around at her neat little shop and said, "Nice place, be a shame." They left. Clara stood in the middle of her salon with her heart slamming, and then she did the thing she'd promised herself she'd never do. She took out the black card, and she called it. He came himself, 20 minutes later, out of the rain. She told him exactly what they'd said, every word, and he listened without moving, and when she got to be ashamed, something happened behind his eyes, a shutter coming down, a temperature dropping. "Ricci," he said, mostly to himself, then to her, and there was something in his voice that in another man she'd have called an apology. "He saw you. He thinks you're a soft thing. A way to reach me with no cost to himself." His jaw tightened. "I told myself the kindest thing I could do for you was stay at a distance, that everything I touch, this happens to it. I stayed away as much as I could stand for weeks." He looked at her. "And it happened anyway. So I'm done keeping my distance. I can't protect you from across a room. Protect me how? You'll have people near you. You won't see most of them. The shop stays safe. You stay safe." A pause, and then the thing that cost him more than any of it. "And you'll let me take you to dinner, not because I'm protecting you, because I want to." Something flickered uncertainty in a man she'd have sworn had none. "If you want to." Rain streaked the dark windows. This dangerous, still, impossible man stood dripping in her little salon, offering protection with one breath and asking, almost shyly, for dinner with the next. "Yes," Clara said. The dinner was at the top of a building she didn't know the name of, a wall of glass. The whole city burning below. Over the last of the wine, she found her courage. "Why me?" she asked. "And don't say your mother. I mean, really, you could have anyone. Why me?" Raphael set down his glass and looked at her a long moment, and she braced for something smooth. "When I was 19, he said instead, "I did a terrible thing. The first, truly terrible one. I came home after, and I couldn't be around anyone. I sat in the dark, and my mother came and sat with me. She didn't ask what I'd done. She just warmed my hands between hers, because they were cold, and held them until I could breathe again." He looked down at his own hands, then up at her. "She's the only person who ever made me feel I was worth more than what I could do for someone. Like I was a person." His voice went very low, and then, 40 years later, a stranger started warming her hands, for nothing, because she was cold, and it was decent. He held Clara's eyes. "I didn't fall for a face. I've seen 10,000 faces. I fell for the one person in this city who did something purely good and expected nothing back. That's the rarest thing in my entire world." A pause. "You are the rarest thing in my entire world." He reached across the table slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, and took her hand and warmed it between both of his. "Now we're even," he said quietly. Outside, the city glittered, and somewhere far below in the dark, men who wished them harm were making their plans. But for that one moment, at the top of the burning city, Clara Bennett let herself be held. Vanessa fell apart slowly, and then all at once. Clara didn't see most of it. She pieced it together later, but the shape was this. Her sister had spent 30 years being certain of exactly one thing about the world, that she was the one who was wanted, and Clara was the one who was not, and that certainty had been the floor she stood on. When Raphael Moretti crossed a ballroom for Clara, the floor gave way. She'd tried, at first, to make it useful. She called Clara twice, sugar over ice, floating the idea that the family should think about how to handle a connection like this together. When Clara declined, gently, Vanessa's calls stopped. What Clara didn't know was that Dante Ricci's people, who watched everything, had noticed the beautiful, resentful sister of the thing Moretti had made precious and had found her before Vanessa found them. They were very good at it. They didn't ask her to hurt anyone. They'd have lost her if they had. They flattered. They implied importance, a seat at a bigger table, a way to matter that had nothing to do with her more successful new brother-in-law-to-be. And all Vanessa had to do, they said, was help arrange one small lunch, two sisters, reconciling. Nothing more. Whether Vanessa let herself understand what nothing more meant, Clara would never be certain, and neither, in the end, would Vanessa. That was the poison of it. She'd built a story where she was helping arrange a meeting, being included at last, and she'd held onto that story with both hands precisely because the truth underneath was unbearable. The call came on a Tuesday, and Vanessa was crying, and the crying was real. I've been so awful to you, Clara, our whole lives, and seeing you happy, it broke something open in me. Please, just lunch, just us. I miss my sister. And Clara, who had a soft heart that had never quite stopped hoping, said yes. She didn't tell Raphael. She knew he'd send men and turn a reconciliation into a security operation, and this was between her and Vanessa. She wanted, once, to have her sister back without shadows. She let the security car drop her 2 blocks from the restaurant and told the man she was fine, just family. She walked the rest herself. The restaurant was dark when she got there, closed, a for lease sign in the window that hadn't been there last week. Clara stopped on the wet sidewalk, and every instinct she had began to scream. She turned to go, and the black van was already at the curb, the door already open, 2 men already moving fast, and she had time to scream once before a hand closed over her mouth and the world went sideways as they dragged her in. The last thing she saw, across the street, was Vanessa, standing in a doorway, and her sister was not composed, not triumphant. Vanessa had both hands pressed over her own mouth, her face gone bloodless and stricken, and she took one lurching step forward toward the van, one, as though her body had understood before her mind did that a line she could not uncross had just been crossed in front of her. Then a man in the doorway put a hand on her arm, and she stopped, and she did nothing, and that the stepping forward, and then the stopping, and the doing nothing was the truest and most terrible thing Clara ever saw on her sister's face. The van door slammed, and she was gone. They took her to an abandoned cannery on the foggy harbor, at the edge of the city where the water met the dark, and they tied her to a chair in a vast empty space that smelled of rust and salt. Clara was terrified, but somewhere in the cold of the van a strange clarity had settled over the fear, the same clarity that got her through every hard thing. You show up, you endure, you pay attention. And so, while her heart hammered, she paid attention. She noticed the ropes on her wrists were nylon, cheap, the kind that stretched when it got damp, and it was damp everywhere here, the fog rolling in through the broken windows. She noticed there were only 3 men where she'd have expected more, which meant they were thin or hurried or both. She noticed the youngest one couldn't quite look at her and kept glancing at the door. And she noticed, when the soft-faced man came, Dante Ricci himself, pleasant, which was worse, that he talked. Men who felt fully in control always talked. Your insurance, Ricci told her, conversational, crouching to her level. Moretti will come, because men like Moretti always come for the soft thing. When he comes, we'll be ready. You'll get to watch. He won't come, Clara said. Ricci's eyebrows lifted, amused. No? It was one dance and one dinner, she said, and she made her voice small and defeated. And it was not hard, because part of her believed it. You've seen me, look at me. Men like him don't blow up their whole world for women like me. You've built this whole thing on a man being sentimental. She let her shoulders sag. You're going to be sitting here a long time. And when he doesn't come, you'll have taken Raphael Moretti's friend, or whatever I am, for nothing. And he'll never forget that you did it. She watched it land, watched the first hairline crack of doubt cross Ricci's pleasant face, not enough to change his plan, but enough. Enough that he stood and paced, and told the youngest man to go check the perimeter again, and now there were 2. It was not a rescue. She could not fight 3 armed men, and she did not try. but she had thinned them by one, and she had planted doubt in the man in charge, and she was working her damp wrists slowly, patiently, against the stretching nylon in the dark, where no one was watching the way she worked at anything, without drama, without stopping. Being fine was the thing she was good for. Tonight, that was a weapon. By the time the shooting started, one of her hands was nearly free. Raphael Moretti had torn the city apart looking for her. He'd known within the hour, when the detail lost her. He'd gone very quiet and very still, and then he had become something the men around him had never seen even him become. Every favor, every debt, every frightened informant in 100 miles was called in that night. He found Vanessa first, and she did not have to be broken. She was already broken. She was sitting on the floor of her own apartment when his men brought him to her, and the moment she saw his face, she told him everything. The location spilling out between sobs, because whatever cold thing had let her make the call had shattered the instant she watched her sister dragged into that van, and there was nothing left of it now but horror. He looked at the woman who had handed her own sister to Dante Ricci. His men said afterward they had genuinely believed, for one moment, that he would kill her where she sat. He didn't. Clara asked him, much later, why. His answer was very quiet. Because you would have had to live in a world where I'd killed your sister, and I won't put anything ugly between us that I can carry myself instead. He took the location and he went to the harbor, and he did not go carefully, and it cost him. Clara had been in the cold room 6 hours when the lights died and the first shot cracked the dark. She couldn't see muzzle flashes strobed the black, orange bursts, the concussion of gunfire in the enclosed space so loud it was a physical thing, men shouting, men falling. She wrenched her nearly free hand the rest of the way loose, threw herself sideways off the chair, and pressed flat to the cold concrete behind an iron pillar, small, low, exactly as she'd planned in the long hours of the dark. And somewhere in the strobing chaos, cutting through all of it, she heard a voice that never shouted, saying one word. Her name, Clara. Here, I'm here behind the pillar, Raphael. He came through the chaos like it was a thing that happened to other men. There was blood on him. She could see it in the strobe, dark across his shirt and his face, and she could not tell whose it was. And he dropped beside her, and his hands were on her face and everywhere, checking. Are you hurt? Clara, look at me. Are you hurt? No. I got a hand free. I'm okay. Something flickered through his terror, a flash of something like awe. You got a hand free, he repeated. I've been working at it for hours. Raphael, there's only 2 of them left, plus Ricci. I heard one leave the... She never finished, because a shape moved in the strobing dark behind him. Ricci, gun rising, and Raphael turned and put himself between Clara and the muzzle without a half-second's thought, and 2 shots fired so close they were one sound. Ricci fell. Raphael did not. But one of his men did. She learned his name later, Thomas, 31, who had 2 daughters. He had come through the door first, the way he always did, so that Raphael wouldn't have to, and he had taken the bullet in the dark that would otherwise have found his boss. He was gone before the lights came up. The world Raphael lived in was not a movie. It did not let its heroes cross a room of gunfire and pay nothing. It took Thomas. It nearly took more. When the fluorescence finally shuddered on over the wreckage, Raphael was still on his knees beside Clara, one arm thrown back around her, shielding her body with his so she wouldn't have to see the rest. Don't look, he said, and his voice had found its calm again, but underneath it was wrecked. Don't look. Look at me. Only at me. She looked at him, only at him, covered in another man's blood. In the ruin of that place, the most feared man in the city held her gaze and let her see all the way down into him, the terror, the relief, the grief, already gathering for the man on the floor. You came, she whispered. I will always come. There is no place in this world you can be that I will not find you. Never. His hand came up to her face. I love you. I should have said it at the top of the city and didn't, because I'm a coward about the one thing that matters. I love you, Clara. You are the only good thing my hands have ever touched. And men died tonight so you'd keep breathing, and I would let them die again. And that is the kind of man I am. And I need you to know it before you choose me. Clara looked at him, this dangerous, grieving, honest man, who had told her the true price instead of hiding it, and she put her hand against his face. Steady hand, careful hand. The hand that warmed cold things for nothing, because it was decent, and that it freed itself in the dark because being fine was a strength after all. "I know exactly what you are," she said. "I've known since the ballroom. Take me home." He lifted her off her feet and carried her out through the harbor fog into the first grey light of morning. And behind them, his men carried Tomas, gently, because Raphael did not leave his people in the dark. Clara saw that too. She understood it was part of the same thing that would never leave her unprotected. She held onto his neck, and she did not look away from any of it. The salon on Wexler Street still opens at 9. It's a little bigger now. Clara took the empty unit next door and knocked through the wall. There's a second chair by the window kept open on Thursday afternoons, because on Thursdays an elderly woman with silver hair in a knot comes in for her nails, and Clara warms her hands, and the two of them talk about their week, and each waits for the other's answer. Elena Moretti likes to say she arranged the whole thing. Clara lets her. It's mostly true. There's a black SUV that waits at the corner now, always because the world Raphael lives in didn't vanish, and it cost a man named Tomas his life, and Raphael will never again let anything he loves stand in that world unprotected. Clara stopped arguing about it. She's learned his need to keep her safe isn't a cage. It's the shape love takes in a man who's only ever known how to lose things. She lets him keep her safe. In return, she keeps him human. There's a college fund now, quiet, for 2 girls in the suburbs who won't ever know where it came from. Clara set it up. Raphael signs the checks and doesn't talk about it, and once a year, on a certain date, he goes very quiet for a day, and she lets him, and warms his hands, and says nothing. Vanessa she did not simply erase. That would have been easier. Instead, months later, Clara went to see her alone, over Raphael's objection, because some things a person has to carry herself to. She found her sister smaller than she remembered, the beauty still there, but somehow beside the point now, like a lamp in a lit room. They did not reconcile, exactly. Vanessa could not stop crying and could not quite say the words, and Clara did not offer forgiveness she didn't yet have. But she saw the truth of it at last, that Vanessa had stepped forward toward that van, and stopped, and that the stopping would be the thing her sister carried to the end of her life, a weight far heavier than anything Clara had ever had to bear. Clara had spent 30 years being measured against Vanessa, and found wanting. She understood now that they had both been measured by the wrong thing the whole time, and that in the only measure that had ever mattered, the plain kind sister had been the rich one all along. She left Vanessa in her lit, empty room, and she did not go back, and she did not hate her. That, too, was a kind of strength no one had ever thought to look for in her. They married in the spring, in a small church at the edge of the water, the harbor, reclaimed now, made theirs. Raphael stood at the altar in a black suit and watched Clara walk toward him in a dress, the deep green of the one she'd worn the night they met, because she'd never felt more herself than she had that night. Dancing, seen at last. When she reached him, the most feared man in the city, who had crossed an entire ballroom for her once when the whole world was laughing, took both her hands in his and warmed them out of habit, out of love, and leaned close so only she could hear. "They said nobody would ever want you," he murmured. Clara smiled up at him, her eyes bright and dry. "They were wrong about everything," Raphael said, "starting with you." And in a church at the edge of the dark water, with his mother weeping happily in the front row, and his silent men keeping watch at the doors, one chair among them left empty, on purpose, always Raphael Moretti kissed the woman the world had told to disappear. She never disappeared again. If you'd like another Mafia boss story, the widowed surgeon who saved the wrong man's life, or the ballerina who witnessed something she was never meant to see, say the word, and I'll write the next one. She warmed cold hands for nothing in a small gold-lit room, long before anyone thought to look, and in the end, that was the thing that saved her. Some people spend their whole lives being told they're too much, or not enough, measured against a ruler that was never true, and every so often a story reminds us that the quiet, decent ones were the rare and beautiful ones all along. If Clara's transformation stayed with you, leave a like so it reaches someone who needs to hear they were never invisible, and subscribe if you want to sit with more stories like this one. Share it with the person in your life whose kindness the world keeps overlooking. And tell me, was Raphael right to let Vanessa live with what she did, or is some mercy heavier than any punishment?